All right. It is 2:30 here in Chicago, so let's go ahead and get started. All right. Welcome again, and thanks for joining us for our final session of the Information Literacy Summit. I'm Fira Miller from DePaul University, and I'll be the moderator for this session. This presentation is Creating to Learn, Propaganda and Attention Economy. And our presenters are Pamela Mann and Christopher Heckman. We are recording the session and we will have a Q&A at the end. So please hold on to your questions and then our presenters will answer those at the end. I will now turn it over to you, Chris and Pamela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Heckman. I'm a research and instruction librarian at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and I'm liaison to the social sciences here as well. I came to this topic because, like many of you, I've seen how pervasive the problem of misinformation has become and the pernicious effect that it can have on our democracy. In January of 2021, I participated in a college-wide panel on the attempted insurrection at the US Capitol. It was clear at that time that misinformation played a role in the events leading up to that day and in the events since then as well.
Hello, I'm Pamela Mann, and I'm also a research and instruction librarian at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and I work with the Arts and Humanities departments. And I have been obsessed with propaganda and disinformation since like the 2016 elections. And since then, I've been researching the recent history of US propaganda, starting with the rise of conservative and evangelical talk radio in the 1970s and the moral panics in the 1980s that seeded this current crisis. We have a significant minority of people who live in a propaganda feedback loop divorced from reality, but tied to their identity. We saw this on January 6th. And this year, I participated as a panelist on a screening of American Insurrection, the PBS Frontline investigation of far-right and right-wing supremacists and the January 6th attack. And this is part of our program that Chris is going to give you some background information on the larger project that we worked on.
Yeah, so talking about that project, just to give us some context here, St. Mary's College is a small public liberal arts college in rural Maryland. As sort of the genesis of the project, in October of 2020, Dr. Antonio Uguez from the Center for the Study of Democracy here at St. Mary's reached out to the library about a potential collaboration. Tony is a political scientist whose research interests include democracy, electoral systems, and electoral integrity. He was also interested in misinformation, particularly around elections. He saw the librarians as a potential ally in an initiative designed to build a shared understanding, both on campus and in the surrounding community, of the intersection between media, civic discourse, and a functioning democracy. So this program would come to be called the Media Literacy, Civic Engagement, and Democracy Project. So there's Tony there on the top left. We were happy to join in on this project and participate. And we were joined by Kat Reiner, the interim director of the library, who you'll see in the center there. And the final member of our team is Dr. Argelia Gonzalez Hurtado, who's a professor of Latin American Studies here at St. Mary's. Her academic interests include Mexico's cultural production, Latin American cinema, indigenous media, and visual and popular culture. So at this point, I am going to pull up a research guide that we created for the project. And there you'll see a fun pizza meme that we have for our most recent event. You can sort of look through this guide if you'd like on your own time, but you'll see here a catalog of some of the previous programming we've done, some of the other events that we've had here. To date, we've had 3 guest speakers, 3 workshops, and 2 film screenings. The event that we're here to talk about today, though, is our most recent workshop on the power of memes. Pamela, I don't know if you want to talk about the
Yeah. So before we move on to the workshop that we are going to focus on today, the Media Literacy, Civic Engagement, and Democracy Project was also planned to include a peer-to-peer workshop with some high school media specialists. So we have 3 public high schools and we have a relationship with them. And they were interested in doing some propaganda and misinformation workshops with their students on their campuses. They are in some ways more directly affected by the propaganda in our county than we are. We are all affected by election misinformation, but they had to deal with propaganda campaigns around masking in schools, which is very controversial, as it is in many places in the country. And now currently the issues of CRT and Don't Say Gay are propaganda campaigns that are going to show up in our local elections. So they had some real interest in sort of getting out in front of that, but because of COVID, that didn't happen.
We hope to try again with that next year. So 2 weeks ago, the present workshop that we're running here focused on memes as a form of propaganda. We worked, Pamela and I, with Arhelia, who I mentioned earlier, and another colleague from the art department, Dr. Jesse McDowell. The goal of the workshop was to teach students about how propaganda works. For the purposes of this workshop, we drew on Work on Propaganda by Dr. Renee Hobbs. We had attended Dr. Hobbs' digital Summer Institute in Digital Literacy last August, and then she came to our campus to deliver a workshop for our faculty the following fall. Pamela is going to talk a little bit about Renee Hobbs' Create to Learn philosophy and how we incorporated that in this workshop.
All right, wait, there's one missing. Okay, so we missed the understanding of power of memes ones. Yeah.
Is this?
That one. Okay, so this was our first propaganda project, which was actually trying to get students to come to a voluntary workshop in which they're going to learn things. So this is not something that is part of a class. This is an extracurricular activity. So we needed something to get students to show up. So we did offer them memes and pizza, and we thought because of our student population, that would appeal to them. And Arhelia made this poster for us. Next slide. So this slide has our original workshop outcomes. And so as Chris said, there were 4 of us on the planning committee, and these were the original goals. 2 of them we had to exclude. So we made 2 changes. The first was we added a section on defining memes. And we added that during the planning process because we were just, as we worked through it, we realized we actually need sort of a definition of what is a meme for the students to work with. The second thing we cut was during the session, and that was the attention economy. We simply did not have time to cover everything that we had planned to. It turned out that we had a very talkative group of students, and that sort of slowed us down.
Which is a good problem to have.
Okay. So we used, as Chris said, we had some training with Renee Hobbs, and so we used her Create to Learn approach, and we incorporated readings from her book, Mind Over Media. And this approach, Create to Learn, emphasizes active learning. So not only did students create propaganda memes, which was one of the goals of the session, students created knowledge as a community through discussion and image analysis. The first part of the session is discussion-based with a focus on image analysis, and the second is about meme making. So this slide that Chris has up here is our icebreaker conversation starter slide. So we had a pretty good turnout of students. And like I said, we know they like memes, they share memes, they make memes. We are a very traditional, small liberal arts college population. So it's mostly Gen Z students who were at this event. But we didn't know what they knew about memes. So we asked them what they know about meme. So we asked, is this a meme? And we show them these 2 images. And we had a discussion about it. The slides are going a little fast. So we had them talk about these memes, and they really did think, and I don't know, maybe I'll ask our audience, is this a meme? You can use your reactions, yes, no, memes, not a memes. A no to both? Anyone else? Wow. So you agree with our students? You agree with our students? They all said no. So they were a little surprised when we came back with yes. We came back with yes, these are in fact memes. And I noticed someone also made a comment about humor, that they expect memes to be humorous, right? But memes aren't necessarily a product of the internet. And so we started doing some historical background on memes, starting with the idea of a meme at its most basic is a cultural unit that is replicated. So this is a short definition here. Any cultural unit that is replicated. So it's not necessarily something that was created by the internet or lives on the internet, right? It lives on the internet for us today, but it is not inherently an internet object.
One thing that we hope to impart to our students, and I think we were successful, is the idea of meme as a more expansive idea than what we think of today as traditional, as specifically internet memes.
So,
right, it's an idea that's existed before that, and it was sort of incorporated into this idea of the specific text overlaying an image.
so next slide. Right, so because students were like, what, memes are internet tools, right? These are things are native to the internet and they're funny. What are you talking about? Jesse McDowell, who is the art professor, used Duchamp's ready-mades to introduce the concept in the historical background on memes. Like I said, it's a cultural unit that is replicated. And she reinforced this idea with some art history, which goes well with our introductory set of memes, connecting the broader idea of memes to Duchamp's ready-mades. Is anyone familiar with ready-mades? Anyone seen them? I've seen them in museums, but never thought to associate them with memes. But what they are about the replication and mutation of images over time that change meanings in changing contexts. And so we're really starting to see how memes, images on the internet also change within that context. So we're starting with the art history analysis. So this is a really brief version of what Jessie did, since she is an artist and I am not. And this is a reason we collaborated with other people to give us better context and understanding of what we were in fact talking about. So to understand that memes aren't just about the internet doesn't mean that I can give you a long lecture about the history of memes and how they function in society over time. So the recontextualizing memes through art, both the icebreaker images and the ready-mades, help students understand the memes as a cultural product that is constantly replicating, spreading, and mutating in response to selective demands of culture in which they develop. And that selective demands of culture talks about how the memes and how we look at them change over time and eventually change over audiences. So this slide we're looking at here is when we started our meme analysis. So I'm going to say we had a really long conversation about these memes because, like most of you, they said no, they were not memes. And we said, yes, they are. So we had a long conversation, and that's the reason why we had to cut some content later in the session, because it took much longer to sort of get to this sort of understanding as memes as not just an internet phenomenon. So we did start with having them do some meme analysis, and we didn't give them any tools for this. We just said, memes, let's analyze some of these memes and discuss sort of the meme, the message, and the audience of these memes. And because these are propaganda memes, they actually had a little more depth to that conversation than they would have had if they were just funny memes. Although these are, again, can be funny memes. And one of the things that came out of that was the role of community or audience, and that how people understand memes is based on if they're part of the community in which this meme was created, and what happens when that meme escapes that community and other people prescribe different meanings to these memes. So we did a little back and forth over these memes to sort of understand how they fit within communities and how other people would reinterpret them.
So we had, for example, with the first meme here on the left, when I first found this and showed this to Pamela, she had an immediate reaction of this isn't a good meme, because they're using here this yellow fist up top to represent Russia, and then this figure in red to represent the people of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian national colors and flag incorporates yellow, and yellow is usually symbolically used to stand for the Ukraine, and red for Russia. So it was jarring and off-putting to her. Whereas when we showed this to the students, some of them were familiar with the TV show that this came from, but more importantly, they had all, or many of them had seen this image used as a template for a meme many times. And they sort of knew what it stood for, and that superseded any kind of confusion about the color. So that was an example for that audience. Yeah. So it became a really good example of how sort of different groups of people might react very differently to the same image.
And that became really important because this sort of transitioned into our discussion about propaganda and what happens when your meme escapes your community. And in propaganda, you want your meme to sort of spread, right? And you want it to go viral. And so the next phase, we started talking more specifically about propaganda, and we handed the 4 keys propaganda chart, which we should drop into the link. So we started doing some propaganda analysis.
Pamela, can you grab it? Actually, since I'm sharing my screen, I don't want to drop the presentation. Or if I exit slideshow mode, I don't know if that will interrupt.
I already did it. So the 4 keys of propaganda are from Mind Over Media. And these are just really, it's a 1 page, 4 keys. And we asked them to use those to start analyzing propaganda images, as we did a little history of propaganda through images. So we started with this one, which was a really easy one for students to understand. It is pretty old, it's from a newspaper, and we wanted to give some context to propaganda as a form that it pre-exists the 21st century and their lives, and that itself is fairly neutral. People can do different things with propaganda. It can be true, it can be false, it can be screaming crazy, and it can be negative or it can be positive, which again, people found it surprising that propaganda could be considered a positive in any particular situation, which it can, because a lot of propaganda education says it's just negative, particularly in the United States. But students really responded to this one. The low wages, high rent was very student friendly, so they understood that one quite well. Next slide. And then we showed these one at a time. And this is to give another context to propaganda, that it comes in different forms. So we started with the Uncle Tom's Cabin. And the first one is the original publication with the original cover art, and had students do some propaganda analysis of Uncle Tom's Cabin based on what they knew of the book, based on the image of it, because it was created specifically as a form of propaganda at the time. And then we showed them this later image, which is from a playbill from 1910, and had them analyze that and then sort of compare the two, because they are very, very different images and are speaking to really different times. Yeah, students found the first one a little easier to remember. So we had them analyze a few other pieces of propaganda, which is showing you a few samples from here. So we took a pizza break because we did promise them pizza. And we had them do a short reading on propaganda, particularly to prepare them for making their own propaganda memes, since that was one of the goals of the session. So Jessie, the artist, she prepared some slides on design elements to keep in mind, because now you're intentionally creating propaganda. You're thinking about your audience, what happens when it escapes your intended audience, how to make it visually interesting. So this is that sort of part of the session. And then Arhelia shared some information about memes, different types of memes. There are a couple of slides on that. And then she shared some meme generators. And that's what students used in the session, since we didn't really have enough time for them to use something like Photoshop or tools they didn't already have access to. So we had the students then make some memes, and then they shared some and then did some analysis of their propaganda memes, so that there was a sharing at the end, and students used their 4 keys again to analyze the memes that they made. And here are some examples of our student memes.
We chose some that were especially took on the propaganda task that we were trying to get them to do. And some of them chose to focus on sort of national or local political issues, and some of them chose to be very focused on things at St. Mary's College. For example, comparing the one on the left and the one on the right here. The right one being in reference to a program that the Student Activities Board put on, and the students seem to be suggesting that the money could have been spent on something else. We have a few more here. This one on the right is actually in reference to another example that we showed in the class. We showed a commercial by Coca-Cola where they were talking about their new recycling campaign in something that we showed as an example of propaganda. And we have a few others here as well.
So we see the joining the tabletop club is someone doing positive propaganda. And it actually took a little more effort in putting this one together. So we did want to emphasize that you could use positive propaganda to get people to join your club or to do the right thing. I mean, they did recognize things like public service announcements as forms of propaganda, but they hadn't really thought that, oh, something like a club or an event that I'm a part of is in fact a form of propaganda to get people to attend.
And we talked about advertising in general as a form of propaganda, as something that uses the same tools. So that's what we have here as far as these memes. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned in this program as well. Basically ways that we found that help to make it successful, and that we might, other ways that we might change it in the future. So one thing we learned that was important is that it's important to advertise early for an event like this one. We didn't really get started early enough on advertising this, and for some of the programs that we've had as part of the larger MLCED series, we've struggled to get attendance. That's something that we're going to have to learn going forward, and maybe take some of these lessons in propaganda to heart ourselves. We did get a good turnout for this particular session, and one of the reasons for that was because Arhelia invited her own students from her class to this event. This was helpful just in getting sort of people to attend, first of all, but also because those students had already built up a rapport with each other from discussing things all semester. So it helped then that when they showed up for this event, they were ready to participate and comfortable talking about things with each other. Even students who weren't part of that class at this event kind of jumped right in because they that energy was there, and that sort of built-in rapport. So we're going to use this sort of anchor class idea in the future for events as well. Then having pizza helped with attendance too, as well as using a topic that's something that's fun and that students know about. One thing we'd like to do going forward, I showed some of the memes here, but some of the memes that students generated didn't really meet the criteria for propaganda. I think it's always going to be tempting to create something that's just goofy or fun, but we're going to try to be more explicit in our directions going forward. That the goal is to create a piece of propaganda specifically. We learned that if you want to solicit feedback for a session like this, it's best to do so either during the event or immediately after. I tried to send a follow-up survey the next week, and at that point for students, it may as well be a million years ago. So a couple other ideas of ways we'd like to sort of tweak this workshop for the next time we do it. We'd like to show the students a collection of all the memes in an anonymized way and give them the ability to vote on them, to vote which are their favorites. One of the things that we sort of cut out of our initial outcomes, because the discussion went long, as Pamela alluded to, was the idea of algorithms and virality and how things spread. This would allow us to talk a little bit about that, because the students can discuss sort of, we can look at the ones that got the most votes and talk a little bit about why those maybe were more effective or why those sort of went viral, so to speak. And we'd also like to create a website or some kind of repository where we can collect these memes for future reference as well.
All right, so that's sort of the end of our presentation. So we had originally planned on doing some breakout groups, but I don't think we really have enough time to get some feedback. So I want you to be able to ask questions. But before you ask questions to me or to us, I'd like to know all of you people who said, no, those were not memes at the very beginning. Are you at all convinced that they are memes now? See, Rebecca.
So convince some people, yes.
I can only see one screen. So questions.
Yeah, go ahead and feel free to put your questions in chat for Christopher and Pamela, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the questions. And thanks again for a great presentation.
And so the questions we were going to ask in the breakout groups were activities you might have for a session like this on propaganda, or who might be potential collaborators on your campus. Because in most campuses, I don't know how many campuses really have a Center for the Study of Democracy that might be spearheading something like this.
I think too, if you have a media studies program or something like that on your campus.
Yeah, so that's something we should probably have pointed out. We don't actually have a media studies program. So we don't really have any dedicated media studies faculty teaching this on our campus, which is one of the reasons why this project sort of came into existence and we were partners, because there's no one doing this on our campus.
Is this a workshop that you both plan on offering on a regular basis?
Yes, we are planning on doing it in fall. The project's going to have a different theme. We're going to be definitely something around race and marginalized identities. And so we'll probably adjust the workshop to focus on those issues.
Great. We do have some questions coming in through chat. Beth is asking, was there a particular motivation for developing this workshop?
Well, I know that Pamela had been studying sort of memes as a form of cultural production from a theoretical perspective. And we also, the the summer institute that we attended with Renee Hobbs sort of touched on these ideas as well. So I think that was sort of the beginnings of the idea.
And also as part of the larger project, we wanted to have something that was just for students. So the idea was to have a student workshop that would focus on some of these issues that were affecting us both in the county and probably also in their real lives, right? So there's an abundance of propaganda. And rather than just focusing on things like misinformation and disinformation, thinking more broadly about how propaganda works in all of our lives in different ways. And that's why I think the idea was to choose propaganda as sort of the theme and to sort of emphasize it not as this evil thing, but as this neutral thing that gets used by different actors.
Thanks. Ashley is mentioning that they don't have a comparable center, but they do have other departments like media studies and the Department of Communication, which I think would be probably something that, we can all kind of reach out and see, even though we don't have, a Center for Democracy, but other partners that we can find across campus that we can work with. Ashley has a question. Do you have ideas for building upon this to perhaps turn it into a semester-long course or maybe an extended, like a 4-part workshop series? Great question.
Not likely to be a semester-long course since we're not teaching faculty. And that would be something we'd have to do extra on top of what we're already doing, which is possible, but would be a lot of work to develop a whole course as a such a thing.
Yeah, we've never done, that's not something that librarians have done here, I think.
Well, it is actually, one of our librarians does teach a course, but it's every other year and it's a lot of work. So that would be a hard thing for us. Because like I said, we don't have faculty who do this work. Like we have one, but he's retiring in a couple of years because they cut the program. This is the truth. They cut the, the program that hosted media studies. And so it's not a thing we do here anymore. And that's why we sort of ended up in this position as the people most likely to teach it. So the idea of a workshop series might be a possibility because we are hoping to do the workshop again. So we might have some variations on it, is a possibility for the second part of Ashley's question.
Yeah, I think we certainly want to tweak it and do it next semester as a standalone workshop. But after that, depending on how it goes and if we can sort of fit it into the larger media literacy, civic engagement, and democracy project, it could be a series.
I know you mentioned getting the word out about the workshop a little earlier this time around. What are some avenues that you're thinking? Do you have social media? Does the library have social media accounts that you might be thinking about advertising or partners across campus?
So we know one way is flyers, which was what we were supposed to do, but we just didn't get it done in time. Chris can talk about the student-centered social media account.
Yeah, we do have an Instagram profile for the library, which I operate. And we can put it out through there. I think the Center for the Study of Democracy also has its own social media accounts that we can use. I think also one thing that we found key with all of these events is getting buy-in from faculty who can then encourage their students to go, especially the same week or the same day. In some cases, they might even offer extra credit or say you can write a reflection paper for extra credit or something like that. And that is, I think, what we've seen from experience is the single most effective way to get students to attend. And you just sort of have to have the buy-in from the faculty to do that.
That makes sense. I'm just curious, you may have included that on the promotion of the workshop flyer. How long was this workshop?
It was 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, so this last comment is sort of one of the potential focuses of our next one. So she's seeing research about misinformation and disinformation spreading in disparate communities. So that is actually one of the things we were thinking about for next year.
That was, yeah, that was Tony's idea from the CSD. Actually, he wanted to focus on specifically that idea.
Yeah, because there's been some podcasts and some articles and some information about that. So we haven't finalized next year's big theme, but we are definitely looking at minority groups, underrepresented groups, and this might be one of them. This is particularly interesting in thinking about the non-Anglo-centric, but also the non-English, and how disinformation spreads in these communities in both languages.
Any other questions for our presenters? All right.
Yes.
Christopher and Pamela, do you have any final? Yes, it is Friday afternoon.
Yeah, and for those of you on the East Coast, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Well, thank you all so much for attending, and thank you for presenting. I think you certainly have given us some ideas that we can take back and try to work with in our home institutions. And again, thanks everyone for attending, and have a lovely weekend. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.